What up, y'all? We talking about Saturn and Aquarius, but it's more than just Saturn and Aquarius. It's every Saturn cycle. Whatever sign it's going through, every Saturn cycle plays an important effect. Blue Lotus Essential, Widget CJ, Bump Jonas, Yaziel, Simpledge, Peach Cobbler, Miss Bama. I told you guys, Jones, Alchemist, Ecstasy, Fine Ass Mom, Young Socrates, Jenny America. Get some people up in here, man. Especially if you know some people that doubt astrology. I'm about to fuck y'all up today. Man. Get some people up in here. So we can talk this science. Because astrology is a science. It definitely is a science. What's up, Wizard CJ? It definitely is a science, man. We need to get some people up in here. We gonna talk about it, though. Because yesterday I made a post on Twitter. And I reposted it on here. I explained to you guys that, this year, up into 2023, over the next 6 months, you are going to see more death and more arrest than you have in the rap business in the past 5 years combined. And I said that because that is what Saturn and Aquarius does. That's what Saturn and Aquarius does. And it's a pattern. I hope you guys will be patient with me and stick around, the whole time, because I got a lot of evidence for you to compare. Now, this is, this Saturn cycle in Aquarius started in December of 2020, and it's gonna last to March of 2023. I got my little notes, but I got more notes too. But we're going to go back all the way to 1903, the 1903 Saturn in Aquarius, to the 1906, and you're going to see same thing going on, just a different generation. You're going to see the same thing in the 1932 to 1935 Saturn in Aquarius. The same thing, January 1962, December to 1964, Saturn in Aquarius. In the February 1991 to January 1994, Saturn in Aquarius. You are going to see the same themes repeating themselves. Now we're going to start out with 1903 to 1906. Got buku notes for y'all. I got the notes for you. Got it highlighted. These are historical events from 1903, 1904, 1905, 1906. I will definitely save this live, I promise. Get some people up in here, because I'm finna teach y'all about Saturn. About to teach y'all about Saturn and Saturn cycles, 30-year cycles as it moves through the signs. Now, people from the generations don't really acknowledge this or pay attention to it, because 30 years, they give you 20 years, that's a life sentence. 30 years it's a whole generational gap. So the old people who've experienced living through this 30 years ago, they're trying not to think about it because they're way in another better time. And the people that are just being born don't realize that they're going through another cycle of what happened 30 years ago when Saturn was in the sign again. So I'm going to give it to you like this. 1903, Edward VII, who was the king of Britain, him and his mother, declared themselves the emperor and empress over India. Cuba, the Cuban-American Treaty happened, where Cuba signed a lease to the United States for Guantanamo Bay. Britain expanded its rule, taking over Western Africa. You know, the Fulani Empire, which was called, you know, Western Sudan. The English banned the Irish from being independent. You know, they denied the Irish independence. Russia and Japan were going to war for Korea, control over Manchuria and the Korean Peninsula. And there was a bombing that killed, I think, the Idaho governor, and they blamed it on the communist union workers. Now, during this time also is when the United States, you know, first started seeing unionization in mining and labor practices. Henry Ford was really busting loose at this time. 1904, you know, Japan and Russia are in a full-fledged war over Korea. It was a big fire in Baltimore. Burned down most of Baltimore. The British government, now Aquarius is the sign of humanitarian stuff. The British government investigated Belgium for the mass murder and torture of Africans that they were doing in the Congo. This was 1904. Britain and France formally signed a treaty after over 1,000 years of Britain and France being at war. They signed a treaty saying that they were going to get along. Britain gave France some land in Gambia and Nigeria, and France gave Britain control of Egypt, and Britain gave France control of Morocco. May of 1904, the first major conflict between, you know, Japanese and Russian troops busted out. You know, the first Olympic Games, first mass distraction of the people, you know, with the Olympic Games happened in 1904. You know, that was the third modern Olympics, but it was the first one in the United States. You know, the Germans in their Southwest African colonies had a rebellion. You know, they used machine guns on the people then. The Dalai Lama signed a treaty with Britain. You know, New York opened its first subway. This is technology. Aquarius rules technology. They went from you know, horses and carriages to mass underground transit. Aquarius rules technology and invention and things like that. You know, 1905, you know, your Japanese used torpedoes on the Russian ships, you know. They ran Russia out of you know, Manchuria and Korea. The San Francisco school board removed Japanese children from the school. You know, racial stuff going on with the school board. If you look at today, critical race theory in the schools. This is what I'm telling you. Everything repeats itself. You know, September of 1905. Theodore Roosevelt, you know, resides over a treaty between Russia and Japan. Russia gave up a few islands and its rights to Manchuria to Japan, while Manchuria remained a part of China. You know, Einstein, a clerk at the patent office in Switzerland, submits his physics paper asking, does inertia of a body depend on the energy content? In this paper, he develops an argument for what would be, you know, his famous equation, E equals mc squared. This is Aquarius taking you into a, you know, nuclear era. Taking you into a nuclear era, man. as we bust into 1906. We bust into 1906, you know. Wait, before we go there, we're going to talk about, you know, the Russian army, the Bolsheviks starting communism, the Communism Party starting to get really moving and stuff like that. You know. 1906, the revolution in Iran. Britain launches a first big gun battleship. The Tsar Nicholas of Russia sent troops to Duma, which is, you know, the region where it's in conflict around the Ukraine now. They started you know, what would become the United States Department of Food and Drug Administration. It started as the Pure Food and Drug Act. The first record player was manufactured. Gandhi, a South African lawyer, began his nonviolent resistance of India. You know, the mistreatment of Indian people. 1905. 1905. You know, as we move up to, you know, 1935, which would be 30 years later. 30 years later from the first incident. In response to Japan's military expansion into Manchuria, which is China, you know, the U.S. Secretary of State declares, you know, they wouldn't recognize any changes in the territory that Japanese created, you know, by invading and annexing land that belonged to China, you know. The Church of England forbids the church to remarry anybody who got divorced. You know, Japanese troops land in Shanghai. This is all things, the Japanese invasion of China is things that's leading up to World War II. You know, and this is in 32 though. This is in 32. World War II that didn't happen for another 10 years almost. But these are the Saturn and Aquarius things that are that triggered the World War. Stalin is in control of Russia now. You know, the Russian emperor has been overthrown and communism is full-fledged in Russia now, 30 years after the Bolsheviks and Communist Party had just started going. Now, again, in the United States, the Communist Party was popping, but somebody got, a former governor got blew up in the explosion. They blamed it on a communist, and that really killed the Communism Party and kept it subdued in the United States. And they could hold on to that traditional power structure that's governed by, you know, Saturn, because Capricorn is on the United States' second house of values. You know, Hitler, you know, Hitler obtains German citizenship by nationalization. You know, the Great Depression began in 32. You know, it was in full-fledged with Herbert Hoover. Ford fired, you know, a lot of people during the Depression, and they were protesting out there in Dearborn, and the police killed a bunch of them. Police killed a bunch of Ford employees. 1932. You know, fired on 3,000 auto workers marching outside a Ford factory. The Japanese troops leave Shanghai in May. The BBC, you know, in 1903, that's when the BBC started the TV. Started TV programming in 1903. 1903 programming, experimental television programming in 1903. May of 1932, 17,000 veterans from World War I marched on Washington. They marched on Washington. Yeah, that's called fascism, Bump Jonas. They marched on Washington. These vets marched on Washington, 17,000. Because they weren't getting their money during the Depression. They were asking for their bonus that the government promised them from World War I because their families were starving in the Depression. They had the United States military turn on the veterans. They didn't fire no shots, but they used a bunch of tear gas on them and shit like that and fucked them up. You know, this is where the Nazi Party first starts to come in power. The first gasoline tax, administered by Herbert Hoover. The Dow Jones industry average was only 41. Was only 41 shares in the Dow Jones. 41.22. July 17th, 6,000 Nazis marched, and communists in Germany, you know, fired on them, and they had a big old firefight in Germany between the communists and the Nazis. 1931, not 1931, but July of 1932, Joseph Stalin, who was the head of the Soviet Union, the USSR, he was beefing with the Ukrainians. USSR was the whole Russia and all the countries, communist countries that belonged to the Soviet Union. You know, a lot of y'all don't remember that because y'all wasn't born until after the 90s, you know, when the Soviet Union had failed. But Russia had a bunch of countries, the Soviet Union, and then, you know, he was blaming it on the peasants in Ukraine rebelling and not doing their job as farmers to raise food. You see today, in a Saturn and Aquarius, again, Russia is on the Ukrainians' ass. You see it today. There's nothing new under the sun. That's why it says that. You know, German President Hindenburg begins negotiations with Adolf Hitler about forming a new government. New form of government, Nazism. You know, attacked by Chinese guerrillas, you know, against the Japanese. Started heating up in 32. 1933. Again, we in the Saturn cycle of Aquarius. You know. The Muslims in India joined together for independence and separation and formed, you know, start the beginnings of what would become the country Pakistan. Pakistan used to be called West. What is that? I can't remember, but they had a East and a West. But they were for the Muslims in India, which was a British colony, you know, called part of the British Empire. 1933, Hitler begins, you know, becomes the chancellor appointed by President Hindenburg. They form the Nazi Party. You know, he delivers his proclamation to the German nation. The United States start creating, you know, these fantasy characters like the Lone Ranger, you know, and things like that, you know. Part of the propaganda machine. Oxford University, you know, with World War I in mind. Student debate resolution. You know, this house will in no circumstances fight for king and country. You know, so they basically saying, you know, they weren't fighting for the British crown no more. Roosevelt took office in 33. He closed banks. Roosevelt closed the banks in the United States and outlawed the citizens of the United States from having gold or using it in their transactions. You know, in the 1903, 1906, Saturn and Aquarius reign. The United States and Britain got off the gold standard. That's why I was telling y'all 2 or 3 years ago, get on this crypto shit. Get on this blockchain shit. The currency situation is about to change in this bitch. It's about to change. It's in the stars. It happens every time with Saturn and Aquarius. Things about the currency and the financial situation change. I'm telling you what's happening. This is a science. Astrology is a science, man. It's a profound science. And if you pay attention, the planetary cycles will repeat themselves. That's why they tell you in the Bible, for the Christians that's watching, there's nothing new up under the sun. Planets move around in a circle. They bring the same energy. We keep having to deal with the same bullshit every Saturn and Aquarius cycle because people refuse to implement the change necessary for society as a whole to advance. For society as a whole to advance. You know, it was 1933 when the Dow Jones showed its first 15% leap. That was the start of the end, the beginning of the end of the Great Depression. You know, Henry Himmler, the Nazi SS leader, you know, opened the first concentration camp in Dachau. Now again, when I talk about the Nazi Party was supporting the Ukrainians to rebel against Russia. Putin is telling y'all right now. You know, he been telling y'all the Azov Battalion are fucking Nazis. They were Nazis when Hitler was in power, and they're Nazis now. So these Nazis are dogging out Russians that live in the Ukraine. I'm finna run up on them. Simple as that. A repeat of history. A repeat of history with the communists and the fascists. You know, fascists are what the Nazis were. They were what Mussolini was. The Japanese, the government controls all the corporations control the government, and the little people just got to deal with it. A police state. You know, that's what's going on right now. That's what's going on right now. Y'all just don't realize it. You know, you're not familiar with BlackRock. You're not familiar with the Vanguard Group. You're not familiar with Blackstone. These multi-trillion-dollar companies that control our government. That's fascism. But they want you to believe that you live in a democracy. They want you to believe you live in a democracy. You know? Japan, you know, continued their assaults on China and things like that. You know, in 33, Roosevelt declared a national emergency. Like I said, banning gold in the United States. Banning United States citizens from owning gold. They also, in 1933, when they took away your right to control your money, they re-legalized alcohol and beer. You can't focus on your problems if you drunk. Go on and get drunk. Go on and celebrate. Go out to the baseball game, the football game, celebrate. Don't focus on what we doing. Watch this sports on TV. That's what they did. I'm giving you guys the rundown. Year by year, 30-year period after 30-year period, it just repeats the same thing and the same thing and the same thing. You know? Also, 1932, guess what? When I say it's going to be more arrests and things like that, more indictments, especially in the rap industry and things like that, 1932, Al Capone. Al Capone went to jail for tax evasion. John Dillinger and them was out robbing the banks and shit. Bonnie and Clyde, Pretty Boy Floyd, Babyface Nelson, the gangsters robbing the banks and shit. They robbed the banks with the PPE money. They robbed the banks with the PPE money. Billions. Next thing you know, the federal government created the FBI in the 30s. They went and killed, you know, they sent Al Capone to jail on the tax evasion. They came out with the RICO Act in the 1930s. They killed the John Dillinger, you know, Machine Gun Kelly, Babyface Nelson, Pretty Boy Floyd, the bank robbers. The government sent the FBI task force to go kill them. Even killed the old lady named Ma Barker, and lied and said she died. They found her with a Tommy gun next to her side to justify killing that old lady, who they said was helping organize the mob plays. You know, they came out with the RICO Act in the 1930s. That's why Frank Nitti told John Dillinger, look, you can't come around. You can't stay at our safe houses. You can't go to our doctor's office. You ain't got no access to none of the mob shit. If we catch you around our shit, we killing you and we killing whoever allowed you here. Because Frank Nitti was running the numbers all over the country. Numbers and lottery and gambling all over the country. This was in the 30s. Saturn and Aquarius cycle. Changing the way, you know, people made money and hustled and stuff like that. Saturn ruled the United States' second house. It ruled the second house of money. Because Capricorn is there. Yep, John, they told John he was bad for business for the mob. He had to go. Ain't no secret, Blue Lotus. 1934. You know. The Apollo Theater opened in Harlem. More entertainment, more distraction. You know, far right people in Paris and other French cities, you know, attempted to overthrow the government. Also, in the 1930s, the Pope sided with Hitler and the Nazis because he felt that communism was a threat to the power of the Catholic Church. Remember that. In the 1930s, the Pope sided with the Nazis because they felt communism was a threat to the maintaining the power of the Catholic Church. That was in the 30s. When we get to the 60s, you'll see another incident where the Catholic Church went against communists in order to maintain power and control for the Catholic Church. Hold up. We gonna get there. We gonna get there. Now, again, I talked to you guys about, you know, Saturn and Aquarius, the government cracked down on organized crime and the mafia and things like that. You know? So we back in 1934, you know, things going on in Central America, you know, with Nicaragua and, you know, El Salvador and things like that. You know, Saturn and Aquarius, El Salvador isn't having a revolution this time. They're having a financial revolution. El Salvador is buying up crypto like it ain't nothing. Every time it dips, El Salvador go buy them some Bitcoin. Hundreds of millions of dollars now. Pay attention. Pay attention. The agriculture. They scraped up all the prairie grass out west and start planting farms, and then it was a drought and the dust blew all over the United States for 4 years straight. Agricultural failure called the Dust Bowl. Have you ever heard of that in history class? Have you ever heard of the Dust Bowl? The dirt was blowing from Oklahoma all the way over to Ohio. All the way over to Ohio, dry topsoil, stripping the land of all its nutrients because they peeled off the prairie grass, trying to grow farms over there. The Dust Bowl. That was in 34. Dust blew from the Dakotas all the way to eastern Tennessee. Absolutely. You know, 34 is when you know, they killed John Dillinger. But first, the FBI ended up killing some old federal troops, you know, civilian conservation corps workers, thinking that it was John Dillinger. You know, Austria negotiates to you know, coordinate with the Vatican, which gives the Church of Austria wide power over you know, education. Was a major strike by longshoremen in San Francisco. It has shut down the U.S. ports and fractured businesses. You know, they 6-day strike went on. More Dust Bowl. The Soviet Union feared Germany and fascism and you know, declared, you know, we got to get busy. We got to get busy. Hitler goes and links up with Mussolini in 34. You know, I forgot 1900 from 03 to 06. That's when the Wright brothers started the flights and flying and stuff like that. You know, more innovation, more technological advances that people never thought could happen. These are cycles of Saturn and Aquarius. They're cycles of Saturn and Aquarius. You know, the French opened a 300-mile railway line. You know, German armed forces swear a personal oath of loyalty, not to the state, but to Adolf Hitler. Where did you see people swearing allegiance to Trump? Not the United States. Everything repeats itself. Everything repeats itself. It repeats itself. That's why I tell y'all, learn astrology. Learn astrology. You'll see the patterns. You know? Airmail service began, you know, between England and Australia. You know, Japanese government renounces its naval limitations agreed to in a treaty between Washington and London because, you know, Britain and the United States, they were making these countries sign treaties that said that they couldn't grow or expand their military so they could come effortlessly colonize them. That's what they used to do to these countries. You know, 1935, Italy joins two of its colonies in Africa, Tripoli and Cyrenaica, into what is now called Libya. You know, unemployment of the United States has fallen from around 25% down to 17%. This is us going into the end of the Great Depression. They left off the gold standard during the Saturn and Aquarius and started the fiat currency with the Federal Reserve and them printing money backed by human debt slaves. That's when they start issuing Social Security cards. State police got created. Things like that in the 30s. In the 30s. Fractional banking. In the 30s. You know. Amelia Earhart flies her first solo flight. The Soviet Union signs a secret pact with Japan. Japan gave them full authority over, you know, China's Eastern Railroad and things like that. Iceland became the first country to legalize abortion in a Saturn and Aquarius cycle. Hitler describes the Soviet Union as a menace to peace. This is the first time, you know, in 1935 when they forbid civilian aircraft from flying over the White House. Hitler tries to get, you know, British to sign a pact with him. You know, sign this pact and we won't fuck y'all up too. Hitler wasn't bullshitting, you know. Roosevelt, you know, grants Pan Am Airways permission to build runways in Guam so they could start attacking Japan. This was before Japan even attacked the United States. You know, the Versailles Treaty allows Germany to have no more than 100,000 men under arms. Hitler orders, you know, that everybody that's able-bodied and over 19 to join the army. You know, the United States starts, you know, building up military presence in the Pacific, Guam and things like that. Persia officially became Iran. Officially became Iran. You know, more dust bowls, you know. Roosevelt and Democrats in Congress create Works Progress Administration, an economic stimulus program that continued until 1933, you know, to help employ people. And, you know, a lot of people on the conservative side, Republicans, were saying that Roosevelt was a you know, communist because he created the Social Security and the welfare system. You know, that's where Social Security come from and all that stuff in 1934. You know, Howard Hughes, you know, broke an airspeed record, more innovation. The Nuremberg laws go into effect. Jews are denied the right rights of German citizens, like marriage, extramarital relationships between Jews and whites were prohibited. They came up with the hydroelectricity, built the Hoover Dam, biggest hydroelectric project, in the world at that time. More stuff going on in the East with China and Japan. The New York governor asked, Roosevelt to allow more Jews into the United States because of what was going on in Germany. Roosevelt said, ain't nothing happening. And all these things, start leading up to World War II. King George II, he had been living in Greece. He returned to London and things like that. Chairman Mao issued the, Communist Manifesto to, boot up against Japan. This was in the 1930s. And we know what all this led to, World War II. World War II. So when we get to 1962, 30 years later, the next time Saturn is in Aquarius, remember I told you the Catholic Church sided with the Nazis because they felt communism was a threat to their control and power in Europe, right? 1962, Saturn goes back into Aquarius. Pope John XIII excommunicates Fidel Castro from the Catholic Church because he's a communist. Because he's a communist and he was fighting against the government and control of Cuba that was exploiting the people, allowing the mobsters to come prostitute out all the, Cuban girls and run gambling and all type of illegal shit in Cuba, So we get into the Indonesia declaring independence. U.S. tries to help Saigon regime by spraying foliage with pesticides to reveal whereabouts of Vietcong. They start using Ancient Orange in Vietnam. Using Ancient Orange in Vietnam. Kennedy bans trade with Cuba except food and medicine. That's communism. Fighting with the so-called democracy, which is just fascism. We don't have democracy. The citizens don't rule. The vote thing is an illusion. It's like who do you want to rape you? This guy or this guy? Greece or no Greece? It's not real democracy. Again, technological innovation. Lieutenant Colonel John Glenn became the first United States citizen to orbit the Earth in space. Japan is back on the rise to power in Asia after World War II and getting hit with nukes. The UN Security Council, said the Soviet, feel like they being threatened. J. Edgar Hoover talks to President Kennedy. Now, President Kennedy, what a lot of you guys don't know is John Kennedy's father was a mobster. He ran with Frank Costello and Lucky Luciano. He was a mobster. He told the mob, who controlled the unions, if you get my son in office, I'm going to make things right for you and we going to get Cuba back for you. We going to get, we going to get Cuba back under control. So, the mafia can do their thing through Cuba. But instead, John Kennedy's brother was the prosecutor, the federal prosecutor, attorney general. He start going after the mob. And he got his top popped and his brother top popped. Yeah. Absolutely. Innovation, technology, crime within the government. Saturn makes you let go of things that aren't working. It makes you let go of things that aren't working. They try to, blame the thing on, Lee Harvey Oswald, but we know, Lee Harvey Oswald wasn't the one who did it, because a guy from Detroit, Jack Ruby, a gangster from Detroit, went down to where they had Lee Harvey Oswald arrested and shot him. Dead men don't tell tales. But J. Edgar Hoover in 1962, he basically told Kennedy, I got the squeeze on you. I heard you on a phone call with Judith Exner. Now, Judith Exner was calling John Kennedy at the White House from a mob boss's house that J. Edgar Hoover had, wiretapped. The Kennedy administration was, basically big fights between democracy and communism and fascism and democracy. These happen every 30 years. Every 30 years. People trying to, change the political power. You're gonna see in this, when we get up to the 90s, how instead of it being, communist revolution and, Nazi revolution, it becomes religious revolutions all over again with the Islamic, jihadists. You're going to see a cycle in this Saturn and Aquarius. And then you're going to understand why I told you in that tweet that I reposted, there's going to be a lot of arrests dealing with rappers, and it's going to be a lot of murder. A lot of murder. A lot of shit's about to happen, I'm telling you. Because the cycles repeat themselves. Politically, a lot of cycles repeat themselves. Just wait till we get to 91 and 94. Then it's going to be fresh in a lot of y'all memories. The older people on here can relate to the things that's going on in the 60s. The Arab League was formed in the 60s. And they was like, Israel ain't got nothing coming. They illegally taking the Palestinians' land. They formed the Arab League. Belgium and them lost their land in the Congo, And the United States government made sure that, them African leaders were murdered. Like Patrice Lumumba. Revolution. Overthrowing colonialism. Capricorn, Capricorn rules colonialism, Saturn and Capricorn and things like that. Colonialism, religious control, things like that. So Algeria became independent in 62, Rwanda, Burundi, the colonial powers start losing a lot of their land. The last atomic bomb was tested, by the United States above ground in Nevada, Algeria became independent from France, Marilyn Monroe was found dead. She was connected to Kennedy too. And a bunch of mobsters. Dead people don't tell secrets. Dead men do not tell no tales. Jamaica became independent. Nelson Mandela got arrested, jailed in these years in the 60s for fighting for independence and against racism, seeking social evolution, innovative social processes. This is what communism was about, Bolshevism, Marxism, these things were social evolutions. People, evolving socially where they didn't want to be controlled by the state or didn't want to be, held down by the state or discriminated against legally by the state. Things that represent, government control over the people, Saturn and Capricorn. The harshness of it led to the innovation and desire to revolt and break free, ruled by Saturn and Aquarius. Aquarius is a sign of freedom and revolution. Innovation, inventiveness, reinvention. You guys understanding this? We can go on and on and on. On and on and on. Yemen, monarch died. Border fighting between India and China. U.S. Congress and mad because, you know, the Soviets were building a fishing port in Cuba. You know, we're threatened by the communists. You know, Egypt recognizes Yemen as its own country. Khrushchev invites Kennedy to visit the Soviet Union. Algeria becomes a member of the United Nations. Uganda becomes independent from Britain and chooses to be a member of the British Commonwealth. We got Soviet Union long-range missiles are ineffective. There's been no missile gap for medium-range missiles, and decided to put them in Cuba. You know, Kennedy informed of the missiles in Cuba. Cuban Missile Crisis. This is 62 as well. You know, Soviet ships on their way to Cuba. Whole nuclear thing. You know, that's the same stuff going on right now in Ukraine. Russia saying, you know, anything pop off, any armament come over here, we going nuclear. Same thing happened in the 60s. Same thing. When Saturn was in Aquarius. You know, Kennedy promises not to invade Cuba. Khrushchev agrees to remove missiles. Kingdoms of Jordan and Saudi Arabia are supporting royalists in Yemen. Egypt assisting Yemen Republican forces. You know, Saudi Arabia breaks, you know, diplomatic ties with Egypt. How many countries in the East has Saudi Arabia, Muslim countries has Saudi Arabia ended its relationship with in the past, you know, since 2000. Since 2000, they've been bombing over in Yemen and stuff. China and India signed a ceasefire. Just like right now today, China and India are both cool with each other and not interfering with what Russia and Ukraine. We're not siding with the U.S. We ain't doing nothing. We neutral. You know, and we ain't going to beef with each other. That's what's going on right now. Same thing. You know. 1963, you know. Kennedy makes travel to Cuba and you know, the exchange of goods illegal, put the embargo against Cuba. You know, the last streetcars disappeared from LA because the cars are common now. The cars are common thing now. These were an innovation from 1903 when Ford started the first, you know, commercial plant. Now it's so mainstream that they don't got to have mass transit. It's affordable and everybody can have one. Innovation. You know? Still hot between, you know, Castro and the United States. Segregation was also ending in the United States, and Governor George Wallace, you know, was forced by federal troops to allow black students to, you know, go into the University of Alabama. Medgar Evers for the NAACP was shot and killed in front of his home in Mississippi. Whole civil rights, another thing of great social change, came with Saturn and Aquarius. Are y'all picking up what I'm putting down? Change is coming. I'm trying to tell you. I've been trying to tell you for the past 2 years. Focus on your own problems. Don't focus on what they doing. Don't focus on the government. Don't focus on the police. Get your community together. Get your finances together. Jump on the crypto. I've been begging y'all to do this for 2 years. Ever since the COVID hit, I've been begging y'all. Get control of your food supply. Things are going to happen and the prices of food are going to go up. I've been begging you to do this for 3 years since COVID started. Invest in crypto. Take your money out the banks. Get on the technology. I've been begging y'all. You know? 63, the Soviet Union sends the first woman into space. Supreme Court strikes down rule requiring recitation of the Lord's Prayer or reading the Bible in public schools. In 62, they finally took Christian indoctrination out of the schools. In 1963. The Buddhist priest in Vietnam set itself on fire and burnt itself alive, protesting for peace. You know, and Buddhist leaders fear more suicide demonstrations, so they banned suicide by fire. All throughout that year, Buddhist students were, you know, burning themselves up, you know, in Vietnam and stuff like that. Anti-American sentiment grew more and more in Vietnam. Martin Luther King dropped his "I Have a Dream" speech. You know, there was a senator, Barry Goldwater, trying to push more nuclear tests and ban the nuclear test treaty. He didn't want that to happen. You know, he wanted more nuclear chaos. You know, they ratified the treaty to outlaw nuclear tests in the atmosphere, in space, and waters of the earth. Kennedy signed that. You know, the Dominican Republic had a coup. You know, President Kennedy gave his approval to the CIA to, you know, start aiding the Southern Vietnam and arming them. You know, they fed, you know, the Vietnam War. They cultivated that. They cultivated that war on the pretext of fighting communism, the spread of communism in Southeast Asia. But that was just one of their ways of, you know, promoting hegemonic wars, because Vietnam was a French colony and they were over there molesting the kids and shit like that and having they favorite time. Real shit. Real shit. You know, by 1963, the United States has, you know, over 16,000 military members in Vietnam, increased from 800 by President Kennedy. Kennedy issues an order to withdraw from Vietnam of 1,000 personnel by the end of 63. According to Robert McNamara, you know, everything was going fine. He lied to the people and he lied to the government. This destroyed the trust between the people and the government of the United States forever. This is where the erosion of trust came in. You know, the McNamara report and them lying. Then they had the coup in Vietnam. You know, in Greece, King Paul gives a mandate to form a new government, political prisoners freed. You seeing the fall of a lot of monarchies in the 60s. A lot of imperial powers falling in the 60s. You know. Kennedy was assassinated, 1963. After he refused to do more nuclear stuff, his brother was going up top on the mob. Then they formed a commission to investigate the assassination. Nothing ever came of that. You know, nothing came of it, because if they told the truth about it, they still wouldn't have his investigation classified as top secret. They still won't declassify it. 60 years later, what's so secret that the people can't know about it? Trying to control that power. Trying to control that power. 1963, you know, Malcolm X split from the Nation of Islam. Split from the Nation of Islam, 1964. 1964, you know, Panama severs relations with the United States. 30 years later, the United States sent, you know, paratroopers over there to arrest Noriega, who Bush was buying cocaine from all in the 70s as the head of the CIA. See what I'm saying? You understand what I'm saying? You seeing the cycle? Seeing the cycle? You know, that the 64, the Arab League was formed. General Win took over Saigon, declaring, freedom from France. Lyndon B. They signed the Civil Rights Act. Malcolm X formed the Black Nationalist Party. Playboy released an interview about capitalism and communism. Brazil had a big military coup. Malcolm X went to Mecca. 400 to 1,000 students marched on Times Square, and another 700 in San Francisco. The first major student demonstration against the Vietnam War. Nikita Khrushchev, the president, of Russia, made a pact with President Nasser of Egypt, working on the dam and things like that. And that's why you see a lot of countries in the Middle East got to make caves, because they was cool with Russia and not with the United States. That's one way you can really tell, what side is what, what nation is side with what nation, based on they arms. The nations that you see with a lot of AK-47s over AR-15s or M16s, those are nations that traditionally sided with Russia and China. The people that got the AR-15s or M16s, M4, whatever you want to call them now, them are the people that were, giving military support and allies of the United States. 1964, they desegregated the schools in the United States. Nelson Rockefeller was running for president. It didn't turn out good for him. They start bringing up his, divorces and marriages and stuff like that. He beat him based on moral, people's moral support. 1964, they sentenced Mandela to life in prison. Sentenced Mandela to life in prison for going against, racism and segregation in South Africa. They call it apartheid government. The summer of 64, a lot of civil rights things were going on, and, people were getting murdered. Michael Schooner, Goodman, Andrew Goodman and James Chaney are murdered near Philadelphia, Mississippi, by the police. By the police and the government. The governor of Mississippi was like, fuck it. We don't do the, nigger loving down here. They said this is exactly what the Mississippi governor said the NAACP stands for. Niggers, alligators, apes, coons, and possums. He said that in Time magazine in 1963. Yep. Six days of rioting in Harlem. Thousands of black people raced through the center of Harlem, shouting at policemen and white people, pulling fire alarms, breaking windows and looting stores. Whites had moved out of Harlem in 1950s. By the 60s, middle-class blacks had followed. They ran Harlem to the ground. After Bumpy Johnson, Bumpy Johnson died. You'll see in this era right here, this is where, the first heroin epidemic, really hit the black community. Frank Lucas, all these people in this generation. 60s and 70s. Led, to drug infestation of black community, destruction of, groups like the Black Panthers, forming and becoming, labeled threats by the United States government, More troops were being sent to Vietnam. North Vietnam torpedoed, ships belonging to the United States. You know how that turned out, rioting in Harlem, sent, the same type of things going on across the nation, especially to, Patterson, New Jersey. Black people, tired of being stepped on, went out and tore the club up. Same thing in Elizabeth, New Jersey. In Saigon, Buddhist militants start, protesting against General Khan's regime. People didn't like him because he was backed by the United States. He was a U.S. puppet. Democratic Party convention, the sister Fannie Lou Hamer, representing Mississippi Freedom Democrat Party, challenged all white Mississippi delegations. She called a press. They called a press conference to tell reporters what they already knew. Get the cameras off that black lady. And that succeeded. They told him, stop giving her publicity. This is another time where corporations sided with the government to oppress the people. This just happened to be black people at this time. Freedom Summer in Mississippi is drawing close. 1964, white Mississippians fear what will happen if civil rights included the right to vote being extended to black people. There were 35 shootings, 6 murders of activists, 80 lynchings, and 65 homes and churches burned. Saturn and Aquarius. People trying to change the status quo. People trying to change the status quo, and people trying to cling to the traditional conservative, imperialistic view of power, represented by Capricorn being on the United States' second house of money and values. Y'all following me still? I'm glad a lot of y'all still stayed up in here, man. A Congress of Racial Equality called core volunteer Jack Weinberg was sitting at the table in Berkeley campus. He was arrested. A crowd of 3,000 people surrounded the police car. They got on top of the police car, made a speech. A Latino brother, Mario Savio. Approximately 400 police went to rescue the police car and then arrest the student who led the protest. China tests its first nuclear bomb, 1964. President Richard Nixon, who got arrested for corruption, obviously, said Lyndon B. Johnson would be a sitting duck. Said his foreign policy was, sucked. By a speech, Ronald Reagan made a speech on TV. Ronald Reagan was an actor. He was the first Donald Trump, the first actor, celebrity, and millionaire to get put in the White House to do the dirty work against the people. Destroy the economy, rob Social Security. Reagan did that in the 80s. He started out as an actor. The people who really control the government, the people with the money, put Reagan in office because he could do and say whatever they wanted him to do and convince the American people because he was an actor. And yes, his wife had more, was getting busted all through Hollywood. Nancy Reagan was a known trollop throughout Hollywood. Absolutely. The so-called radio, they call the radio program Goldwater New World, creates a panic amongst listeners in the Netherlands. This is just like InfoWars and these other podcasts where they're spreading fear and propaganda, being controlled and things like that. Same thing going on. Same thing going on today that was going on in the 60s and in the 30s and in 1906 and before. The things that happened, you know, from 62 to 65 are what led up to, you know, Malcolm X being murdered, the Black Panthers being attacked by the United States government, you know, black nationalists being targeted by the United States government, Saturn and Aquarius. It brings these type of things. It's a lot of people in the music industry right now that are using their voice to innovate, to push crypto, to push, you know, social change, to push, you know, business. You know, people out there having these conventions talking about real estate investing and things like this. These are people of the music industry and hip hop community, radio personalities like DJ Envy. These people are ruled by the sign of Aquarius. Innovative thinkers. You know, the motherfucker Grant Cardone. You see these people teaching innovative ways to change your financial situation, to spread knowledge, to make the world a more humane place, and shows you that it's money for everybody. These are the people that are going to be targeted. Watch what I tell you. If we don't do our part again. You know, if we on our job, you know, a motherfucker can't get down. Not as bad as they want to. You know, when you on your job, you ahead of the curve. You know, that's why I try to tell you, astrology is a science, man. It's like a clock. It's like a clock. And if you get ahead of the curve, you're going to be straight. You're going to be straight if you can get ahead of the curve. You know, 1991. You know, when we go back to 1903, you know, to 1906, Iraq became a kingdom. It got its independence from Britain. 1991. In another Saturn Aquarius cycle, Iraq, you know, invaded Kuwait. The United States start bombing Iraq. Y'all remember that? You know, they bombed Israel too. You know, the Irish Republic Army. They were considered white terrorists. They were blowing shit up all over Britain in the 90s, 80s too, 70s and 60s too. Blowing shit up for their freedom and independence. You know, ground forces moved from Saudi Arabia to attack Iraq. You know, Iraq, you know, Scud missiles hit the United States barracks, killing, you know, 9 Saudis and injuring 100 U.S. soldiers. You know, 1991, police brutality. They beat the shit out of Rodney King. It was recorded. It was recorded on a camera. Some technology, innovation, got that information out to the world. That was 1991. You ain't seeing nothing different. In this Saturn cycle with George Floyd, it got recorded. It got broadcasted all over the world. There were riots demanding change. Saturn in Aquarius. You know, Saturn in Capricorn and Capricorn being on the United States, you know, second house of values, it shows how cruel and heartless dictators they can be when it comes to, you know, the government and the police and shit like that. You understanding me? You understanding this science? You know, they beat Rodney King. Iran had things going on. And another 30-year cycle, Iran changed its name from Persia to Iran. You remember that? Remember I told y'all about that? You're going to hear the same countries, the same situations every time. You know, 1991, you know, the son of Gandhi. You know, the son of Gandhi, the grandson of Gandhi, you know, was murdered. Was murdered. You know, the New York Times promoting, you know, conflict between the Soviet Union started to collapse in 91. You know, Iraq shot up UN inspectors, things, you know, with Yugoslavia and things like that. The Warsaw Pact, in the Soviet Union coup attempt begins with President Gorbachev being put under house arrest. This is the fall of the Soviet Union. Estonia declares independence. Latvia declares independence. In Moscow, Boris Yeltsin has called for general strike to resist the coup against Gorbachev. You know, a bunch of people come support Boris Yeltsin. Ukraine, 30 years ago, 1991. The Ukrainians proclaimed independence from the Soviet Union, which is today called Russia. That was the main country in the Soviet Union. The Supreme Soviet suspends all, Communist Party activities. Belarus declares independence. Moldova declares independence. Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan declare independence from Russia. This is the collapse of the Soviet Union. Communism, a repeated theme since 1906. Communism. Y'all following me? 91. Jean-Bertrand Aristide was removed from power in Haiti with a bloody coup. Clarence Thomas with the Supreme Court, who in 91, guess what? Who's back in the news about the Supreme Court and corruption on the Supreme Court? His wife funding, the January 6th shit. Clarence Thomas. Clarence Thomas. Everything comes full circle, man. Ukrainians, voted for independence. North and South Korea signed their first non-aggression pact. United Nations replaced the Russian Federation with replace the Soviet Union seat at the UN with the seat for the Russian Federation. 1992. Japan apologizes to Korean women for sexual slavery. Slovenia and Croatia are recognized as independents by 12-nation European community, which, turned out to become the European Union in the later years. Mongolia ratified its constitution. The war in Yugoslavia started, Ireland Supreme Court allows a 14-year-old rape victim to travel to England for abortion. And the Irish are heavy in the Catholic Church. Jury found LA police accused of excessive force against Rodney King not guilty. Y'all know what happened after that. Tear the club up. We tore the club up. This was in a Saturn Aquarius cycle. Man. 7-day troops from the 7th Infantry and 1st Marine Division arrived in LA after 4 days of rioting. That was illegal right there. The United States military is never supposed to be activated on the United States soil. That goes to show the abuse of power and the pattern of abuse of power by the government, represented by Capricorn on the United States second house cusp. If we can't control you with money, we're going to control you with our power and by force and by brutality and cruelty. That's what they do. That's what they do, man. Bill Clinton was nominated for president. He selected Al Gore. The Irish Republic Army bombed a forensic laboratory in Belfast. The Kentucky Supreme Court rules that laws criminalizing same-sex sodomy are unconstitutional and predict that other states will, agree. This was for, the LGBT rights. If we go back to the 1930s, Hitler outed one of his homosexual partners as a homosexual and then took out, went on a rampage against gays in Germany to, deflect the focus from his homosexuality to preserve his power. Homosexuality was something common. But again, Saturn and Aquarius rules, homosexual relationships, homosexuality, transgenderism, all this stuff. Aquarius rules that. So in these Saturn and Aquarius cycles, you're going to see a lot of stuff like that. They made Pride Month a national month during this time, during this past 3 years, this past 3-year cycle. Now they're commercializing it. The same thing with Juneteenth. They make it a holiday. You will pretend like we accept you and value you, so we can monetize and tap into the money of your community. Juneteenth, Pride, same thing. Exploiting the community. Same shit with everybody got the Ukraine flag, support Ukraine. They just tapping into that demographic, finding a way to monetize your suffering. You know? 92, the Pope John Paul apologizes and lifts Inquisition etiquette against Galileo. You know, the Catholic Church was killing people for practicing science. Bill Clinton became president. The Church of England votes to allow women to become priests. United States United States and the UN invade Somalia. What they doing now? It's not all over the news, but they've been bombing Somalia. They've been launching military operations in Somalia. This ain't no lie. But they put what they want you to see in the news. They want you to focus on. That's what they make you focus on. You know, the Hindus and the Muslims in India was beefing hard. You know, Hindu militants destroyed a mosque because the Muslims had invaded India, built a mosque over a Hindu temple where Rama was born, 5,000 years ago. 93. The Bush administration announces, Iraq has moved surface-to-air missiles into southern Iraq. Ghana Jerry Rawlings became president. That moved Ghana from a military dictatorship into a democratic nation. The UN signed arms control, prohibiting the development and production, stockpiling, use of chemical weapons. Everybody signed the treaty except Angola, North Korea, Egypt, South Sudan, and Syria. Bill Clinton becomes the president in 93. The Twin Towers were bombed. Twin Towers were bombed for the first time. World Trade Center was bombed for the first time in 93. I believe Timothy McVeigh blew up Oklahoma City in this Saturn and Aquarius thing too. The ATF down there in Waco, Texas, with David Koresh had that standoff, which ended, 51 days later with the ATF murdering 75 people, including 21 children. Technology advances in 93. The World Wide Web is developed by the European organizers of nuclear research in the Little Northwest in Northwest Geneva. That was 30 years ago. This 30 year, they're talking about blockchain, crypto, tech, Web 3. The same thing they were saying about the World Wide Web and the internet in the 93. They're talking about with crypto and blockchain and Web 3. Meta ain't nobody. Meta ain't nobody when it comes to blockchain and Web 3 and virtual reality. Facebook is trash. I promise you, man. They trademarked that name so they could try to dominate the industry. They ain't nowhere. They ain't nowhere, man. I promise you that. I promise you that. Kim Jong, let me see. Ethiopia, after 30 years of war, Ethiopia and Eritrea, finally signed a peace treaty. Burundi elected its first president. Bill Clinton's lawyer was found dead with a .38 caliber pistol in his mouth. They were investigating Bill and Hillary for Whitewater, real estate fraud and stuff like that. The PLO, which was Yasser Arafat and the Israelis, they signed a treaty. Russian troops finally left Poland you know, after World War II in 93. Yep. Cambodia restored its monarchy. They separated from, you know, communism, restored their monarchy. In Mogadishu, Somalia, the United States, you know, U.S. Army Rangers supposed to be the baddest of the bad. Their whole unit got slaughtered by Somalians. Yeah. And then Bill Clinton sent 200 troops over there with tanks and armored personnel and gunships and all that shit. You know what they do. You know what they do with their hegemonic wars. China went against the United States. China went against the United States and was testing, Black Hawk Down, testing nuclear weapons in 94. Said fuck Bill Clinton and fuck what he was talking about. Then the United States went back into, you know, testing nuclear weapons and stuff like that. Back in 93, Bill Clinton is saying the same shit that Trump and everybody else was saying. North Korea cannot develop a nuclear bomb. North Korea has hypersonic nuclear missiles now. In this 30 years from when they said Korea cannot develop a nuclear bomb, 30 years later, with Saturn and Aquarius again, North Korea has hypersonic nuclear missiles. Hypersonic. U.S. can't shoot them down. This again alludes back to the democracy communism false fight that's been going on since 1903. It's fake. It's manufactured. You got to have a bad guy in order to be a good guy and direct the brainwashed people where they should go. You understand that? (1993) also is when the Israel and the Vatican started their diplomatic, you know, ties. They became best of buddies. 94, Giuliani became the mayor of New York City. Clinton and Yeltsin signed the Kremlin Accords, dismantling the nuclear arsenal in the Ukraine. 30 years after Vietnam War ended, the United States ended its trade embargo against Vietnam. You know, North Korea began investing in nuclear power. U.S. and South Korea agreed the deployment of Patriot missiles to South Korea to defend against North Korean ballistic missiles. You know, the Rwanda genocide, 94. Belgium withdraws its peacekeeping troops from Rwanda. You know, Nixon dies in New York City. South African, you know, multiracial elections happened for the first time in 30 years after they sentenced Nelson Mandela to life in prison for fighting for freedom and innovation and change against the apartheid segregation and running over African people. 30 years later, at the next Saturn Aquarius cycle, he became the president of South Africa. 30 years after they murdered Fred Hampton, his son is out advocating for the Black Panthers. They released a movie, Judas and the Black Messiah, 30 years after Fred Hampton was murdered. Everything happens in cycles. Everything happened in cycles. You know? OJ killed his wife, 94, and got away with it. Kim Jong-il father, Kim Il-sung, died of a heart attack. Kim Jong-il took control of North Korea 30 years ago in a Saturn Aquarius cycle. Newt Gingrich became a real powerhouse in the Republican Party, starting the far-right philosophy, alt-right philosophy, you know, openly pushing racism in politics 30 years ago. 30 years ago, the United States, ran up on Haiti. China and Russia agreed 30 years ago to take their nuclear weapons from targeting each other, signed an agreement that they would fight on each other's side. Saturn and Aquarius. George W. Bush becomes the governor of Texas. Rush Limbaugh and Newt Gingrich get together and really start to get the racist Republican Party riled up, telling them, reporters ain't your friend, the media is corrupt and stuff like that. They started an investigation in the Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton from Kenneth Starr for the Whitewater. December 19th, 94, civil unions in Denmark and Israel, they legalized same-sex marriages. This was 30 years ago. It's 30 years ago. And it's Saturn Aquarius, setting a different stage for laws about, sexuality and things like this. And here we are, 30 years from 1994, in another Saturn and Aquarius cycle. You're seeing the transgender stuff. You're seeing the technological advances. You're seeing the economic collapse that you've seen in the 30s. You're seeing the shift to a different monetary standard from fiat currency like dollars and pesos and things like that to cryptocurrency. In the 30s, you've seen the government surge against organized crime. You've seen it in the 60s. Crime waves and drugs and stuff like that, and the government raged against crime. That was another Saturn and Aquarius cycle. The crime associated with music, the crime associated, catching all these people in the music industry on the PPE loans and shit like that. I'm telling you, they have a special police unit. Special police unit. Just like when they started the FBI in the 30s with the mob, John Dillinger, Al Capone with the tax evasion, the RICO Act in the 30s. They're doing it again now for the rappers. They're doing it. They're doing it. Athletes too. They're doing it. And like I said in that tweet, you're going to see a lot of people getting killed and a lot of people getting arrested. If you're in the music industry, you better tighten up. You better make sure, they don't got no way to associate you with a RICO. If you claim in a gang, they can hit you with the RICO. Hit you with the RICO. If they want to say it's a gang, if you NBA young boy, they gonna connect crimes to people associated with the NBA name in the music industry, hit them all with the RICO. And the niggas who's broke and weak are gonna tell. Envious, they gonna tell. Feel like they ain't eating like they supposed to, or they should be outshining somebody, they gonna tell. Already telling. I know how rats operate. I went to prison at 16 for murder, and it's not because they had the gun, because they never recovered the gun in my case. Had a bunch of people ratting. Rat get scared, they get to squeaking. But that's not here nor there, because it turned out for the greater for moi. Did that time and came out like a beast. Came out full of magic. Came out with that magic in full effect and been on it. Been trying to, push power to other people and show you how to use what the universe has provided for us to stay ahead of the curve. The word sorcerer means he who controls fate. If you can use astrology to predict the future, if you can use tarot to predict the future, if you can use divination to predict the future, then you can change a future outcome. If you can change the outcome of the future, you controlling fate. Because fate is the consequences or rewards of the decisions that we make. The decision of the United States government to cling to past understandings of power, financial stuff, independence, leadership, for them to cling to these false, outdated ideas, that's what's bringing the economic collapse. That's what's bringing the revolutions against the police. Because it's no public trust, it's no justice. This is what's fueling the crime, the failure to distribute the wealth. They are repeating cycles and cycles and cycles of the same Saturn and Capricorn behavior. When Saturn goes into Capricorn, it doesn't tell you to grip harder and get crueler. It's telling you to release the unnecessary control. Because when you're trying to control every aspect of people's life, they thinking they values, because Capricorn's on the United States second house cusp. And that's what they do all over the world. They try to control the values of other people. They try to control the wealth of other people. They try to control the worth of other nations. Right? And Saturn tells you, when you don't let go of the excessive shit, I'm going to bust your ass. I'm going to bust your ass. Pluto is going through the United States second house. Through United States second house of money and values. Pluto going through there. When you refuse to let go, when you abuse that power that Pluto puts in that house, Pluto destroys you. Pluto humbles you. It humbles you. Everything that's been happening here has been happening for a reason. And I've told you guys how to prepare for it. I told you how to get ready. I told you to get ready. Now gas is, $5 a gallon is a normal for gas almost everywhere. Food prices are up 25%, but you're still making the same amount of money. Have you planted a garden? Have you thought to get with people in your community? Because Aquarius rules humanitarian and collective operations. Have you got with people in your community say, let's buy this vacant lot. It's only $600. That's, if we get, it's $600. If we get, six of us with $100, or 12 of us with 50, we got this house, we got this land. We're gonna put a garden here. We're gonna put a garden in this lot. Y'all ain't working collective. Y'all on that selfish shit. That Capricorn on the second house. Selfish. Me, not the collective. And we all collectively suffering because we can't get beyond our selfishness. Now, Saturn went retrograde at 25 or 26 degrees, Aquarius. This retrograding is retrograding back to hit the last eclipse. The last eclipse was in Scorpio, so it's going to square that eclipse. It's going to square that eclipse. Scorpio is on, the United States 12th house of secrets. That's where that eclipse happened at. You're going to see things, you know, and people coming out of the prisons. You know, you're going to see changes in the prison system, you know, the mental health system and things like that. And you're going to see a lot of deception from Hollywood and from the media. Because the 12th house is naturally ruled by Neptune and rules fantasy and film, engineered reality. You know? And then you got Pluto retrograde, went retrograde on the 30th at like 27 degrees Capricorn. That's retrograding back into a sextile, which is going to also trigger that eclipse energy. That eclipse energy, the eclipse that happened in Taurus. Taurus rules money. It rules money. And the eclipse that rules in Scorpio, it rules other people's money. Now, Taurus in the United States chart is the 6th house. The 6th house rules the military. It rules the military. It rules the unions. It rules hospital workers. It rules the health of the nation. People ain't eating right. Leads to malnutrition. Malnutrition leads to weakened immune systems. Also in those, you know, in those 30-year Saturn cycles, Saturn in Aquarius, you know, the United States got hit by yellow fever. Yellow fever was spread by mosquitoes. They had tuberculosis outbreaks in the 1930s during the Depression because of poor health and poverty. You know, this 30-year cycle it's another virus, another sickness. You know? Everything happens in cycles. And just like in the 30s, the police cracked down on the mob and organized crime and stuff. In the 60s, they cracked down on, you know, Black Panthers and things like that. A lot of drug activity. In the 90s, with the Biden crime bill. You know, 1994, the crime bill with the crack and all that stuff. Mass incarceration. 30 years later, they're coming with the same program. I guarantee it. That's why I put what I put in that tweet. And now I explained it to you in the most scientific way that I can. I've showed you the evidence. You can go check the dates for yourself and see what correlates. The communism, the drugs, the organized crime, the political and, you know, unrest going on in the Far East, which is China and Russia and, you know, Japan and Korea and all that stuff. Every cycle, these same countries involved. Every cycle, the same themes involved. Monetary situation, same thing involved. Agriculture and farming situation, same thing involved. Astrology is a science that can help you if you allow it. It can help you if you allow it, man. Blue Lotus asks, why does the Vatican need power? Shit, anybody with power don't never want to give it up. What the fuck? If you're blessed by God, why do you need gold chalices and all that shit in your church? Why do you need to have gold carriages? If you the chosen people, you know, when it comes to Israel, if you the chosen people, if you God's chosen people, why did you need Britain to make you a country? These are illusions of power. No, these are illusions of power. That's why I say people, you allow people to engineer your reality. You allow people to engineer your reality. They control your perception. They control what you perceive as power. That's why, you know, people get a little bit of money being an entertainer. And they got to go get everything that they feel a powerful person has. Whether it's a Bentley, a Rolex, you know, a mansion. They get these things before they even have the money to make sure they can take care of it for 10 years. Because their perception has been controlled. You know, Their perception of what wealth is fucked up. They only can do what they see. They can only pair it off what they hear. Same thing with this magic shit. People will pair it off shit that they read, shit that they heard, and can't do shit. Can't manifest a motherfucking thing. People who get in power want to stay in power. That's why people go for re-election and re-election and re-election. You know, for 2,000 plus years, the Catholic Church has been able to influence and control political situations all around the world. Catholic Church helped Kennedy get in there. Catholic Church used to work right hand in hand, fist and glove with the mafia. It wasn't, the United States military or the United States government that prevented Nazism from prevailing in the United States, because George Bush's grandfather, George W. Bush, the one who didn't give a fuck about the people in Katrina, his grandfather, Prescott Bush, was doing big business with the Nazis. The government took his steel company. When you talk about the innovation that Saturn and Aquarius bring from the 30s, Hitler and them came up with the rockets. Hitler invented the rocket. He didn't invent it. He translated some stuff that he stole from India and used that to create rockets. Then after the war, the United States let all the Nazi war criminals come form NASA. Yeah. They don't care about morals. They don't care about, they don't care about morals. They don't care about values. None of this bullshit they push. They don't care about none of that, because they pardon war criminals to come over here and experiment on y'all. Pharmaceuticals, all that shit. This is reality. This is reality, the real reality. While y'all caught up in an engineered reality. You have to allow yourself to step out of this shit. You have to allow yourself to step out of this shit. And a lot of y'all don't want to do it. A lot of y'all don't want to do it. They've been experimenting with media controlling the people since 1903. The BBC started that. And these dates that I gave you, 1903, 1906, 1931 to 1934, 1962 to 1964, 1991 to 1994, and now, 2020 to 2023. Look at the inventions that came out during those dates. Look how technology sent men beyond where they thought they could go. Whether it was the Morse code, the telephone, the airplane, all these things happen in Saturn and Aquarius cycles. Changes in the financial systems, Britain and the United States getting off the gold standard. Everything innovative happens during Saturn and Aquarius cycles. I'm telling y'all, get your act together. Get your act together. Get invested in technology. Get invested in yourself, because you the coldest computer and machine that there is. I'm dropping these courses for a reason. I'm dropping these master classes for a reason. To equip you with a technology that you can use to improve not only your own life, but the lives of the people that you care about. Improve the quality of your community. You ask the people in my master class, they'll tell you. I tell them, any opportunity you see to do a spell, do it. Whether you going through the raggedy, I ride my bike through the raggediest part of the Southwest Detroit. The worst. Through the hole. And I do prosperity spells every day. Every day. I heal people I see just because I want to. Because I can. Do cleanses on the people that are homeless. winos. You got to take the initiative. And just like you healing the people that's visibly fucked up, you got to send some prosperity and healing to the people that you see out mowing their lawns, picking up the trash. You know, community service. People, you know, fixing up the houses. You gotta shoot the blessings onto them. You gotta do more with your magic to change not just your life, but the fucking environment that you live in. The environment that you live in. The people that's in your environment. You have to be willing to choose to be a key element in the transformation of your community. You can't just march. You can't just, you know, vote. You have to do something energetically to shift the frequency of the people in your community. That's the only reason I be trying to reach out to rappers and shit, man. That's the only reason. Because they have a voice. They got the voice and the platform to reach the community, and they really got a fucking obligation. Because once you go from here, I'm in the hood, I'm trapping hard, I'm struggling, I got to go through this, I got to carry a pistol, and you get to here, you shouldn't even be talking about shit down here no more. You done elevated, but you don't know how to step your fucking game up. That's the problem. They start out here, they transcend to here, and then they mentality still down here. Get up here and start elevating, bringing people up. Look, I went through that adversity. You ain't got to do that. You know, I got famous talking about that shit, but I'm not living like that no more. How the fuck? I don't even see how a motherfucker can entertain a nigga that's a multi-millionaire from music talking about cutting dope or being in shootouts. Bitch, you don't even live in the hood. And y'all idolizing this bullshit that they perpetuating when they live up here. They up here. They ain't breaking down no packs. They ain't breaking down no packs. They might go to the hood and put a couple niggas on. But like I said, that Saturn in Aquarius, about to put them feds on these niggas' ass. Got a special task force for these niggas. You want to push destruction? I told y'all, get y'all shit together. You was on borrowed time. I told you when this COVID shit hit. Get your racks up, do what you got to do. But, you know, start talking to the people in the community. Because you next. How many posts did I say? You know, don't think because, you know, they catching it right now that it's all good. Black people, you next. I told you that. I told you that. Instead of them getting up here and using this platform up here to bring other people up here and transcend this bullshit, they keep fueling the fire down here. They keep pouring gas on the fire. But guess what? When you pour gas on the fire down here, that flame jump up and burn your motherfucking ass. It's coming.